I'm not here to hype a product I haven't actually thought through. I'm here to help you decide whether the Maxstar 161 STL from Miller really belongs in your workshop or if it's just another pricey box that will sit idle. If you're on the fence because you've heard a mix of "it's perfect for thin sheet work" and "it's overkill for hobby projects," that's exactly the kind of hesitation I want to unpack. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the Maxstar 161 STL lives in the niche of entry-level TIG machines that promise industrial-grade results without demanding a dedicated shop space. That promise is tempting, but the real question is whether the machine lives up to the daily grind of a home-based fabricator or a small business shop that needs to move between aluminum, stainless, and mild steel without constantly reconfiguring the rig. I've spent the last few weeks watching a handful of YouTubers set it up, reading the manual, and listening to forum threads where people compare it to the older 140 series. The consensus is that the Maxstar's power range is generous enough for inch steel, but you'll start to feel the limits when you push past inch or try to run high amperage pulses for thick stainless. If you're a beginner who's finally ready to graduate from stick or MIG to TIG because you want cleaner welds on automotive trim or hobby-grade art pieces, the Maxstar's built-in pulse control and AC balance knob are a solid introduction. Those controls are not hidden behind a maze of menus. They sit on the front panel in a layout that feels familiar if you've ever used a Miller stick welder. In practice, that means you can dial in a smoother bead on thin aluminum sheet in under 10 minutes, which is a big win compared to the learning curve on a plain Aconley machine. The real-world advantage shows up when you're welding a 0.8 mm aluminum panel for a custom bike frame. The AC balance lets you fine-tune the heat input so the metal stays bright, and the pulse feature reduces the risk of burn-through. On the flip side, if you're looking for a workstation that can sit on a production line and run 24/7, the Maxstar's cooling system is a practical compromise. It uses an internal fan that kicks in once you breach about 180 amps, and while it does keep the unit from overheating during moderate runs, you'll notice the fan humming louder than a typical industrial welder when you push the machine to its upper limit. For a hobbyist that only welds a few hours a weekend, that's a minor annoyance. For a small shop that needs to churn out parts back-to-back, the fan noise and occasional thermal throttling can translate into slower cycle times. That's a hidden trade-off that isn't obvious from the spec sheet but becomes clear when you try to weld an inch stainless pipe for a custom exhaust system. You'll need to pause every few minutes to let the unit cool, or you'll see the output dip. Another practical point that many reviewers overlook is the size and weight of the Maxstar. It's packaged in a box that's just under a foot wide and a little taller than a standard toolbox, which makes it manageable to lift onto a workbench without a forklift. The included accessories, a foot pedal, torch, and a few grounding clamps are enough to start welding right out of the box, but they are on the lighter side. The torch, for example, is a standard Miller design that feels sturdy, yet the collet system is a bit tighter than what you'd find on a high-end production torch. If you plan to swap tips frequently or work with a wide variety of electrode sizes, you might find yourself reaching for an aftermarket torch after a few weeks. Who should actually consider buying the Maxstar 161 STL? If you're a DI enthusiast who builds occasional automotive restorations, fabricates custom brackets, or does art metalwork, the machine gives you the control you need without demanding a dedicated electrical upgrade. It runs off a standard 120V outlet, which is a huge convenience for a garage setting. It also shines for anyone who needs to dip in and out of AC and DC welding throughout a single project. The switch is manual but immediate, so you can go from welding a stainless rail to an aluminum panel without swapping machines. For small business owners who do low-volume production of thin-walled parts, the Maxstar can serve as a reliable workhorse, provided you schedule short breaks to keep the cooling fan from throttling performance. Who should skip it? If your workflow revolves around thick structural steel, you'll quickly run into the 160 amp ceiling that caps the machine's ability to lay down deep, penetrating beads. In that scenario, a larger transformer-based TIG or a dedicated multiprocess machine would give you a smoother experience and less downtime. Likewise, if you run a high-throughput shop where the welder needs to stay at full power for hours on end, the Maxstar's fan-cooled design could become a bottleneck. For those users, the extra upfront cost of a more